Hi, it's Chris Hales and Scott Bartle here. Hope everybody is well. This is an addendum to the audio series that we've been doing on the courtesy notices. Because this release of the courtesy notice that we're doing, sort of the second major release, now has 5 different versions for different classes of actions by the proponent. And we're trying to cover all bases here. It allows you to actually issue a courtesy notice to virtually anyone actively involved in unlawful acts on behalf of a foreclosed entity. And you'll see as we work through it that you can pretty much send it to anybody. You wouldn't necessarily expect a response when you start doing the more general courtesy notices, but we have terms and conditions to cover that very nicely if they happen to respond. So how are you, Scott?
Pretty tired, otherwise good. And
Yep,
you?
same. We've both been having some pretty late nights because life goes on, as well as the build-up of activity around the People's Trust.
Definitely.
So, Scott, shall we run through the 5 different classes?
Yeah, I suppose the first place to start is the original as to what we had it, and now that
That's called number 1, paper action.
brilliant, and now that that's in the Word document format, essentially we just provided a simple context that relates to something that you've received by mail or in person. Essentially, you've got a piece of paper that's got a name, a reference number on the top that you can use as the starting point for issuing this courtesy notice.
Yeah, so all the instructions that we've given guiding people to actually use it still apply to this one.
Yep.
Very straightforward. Now that's obviously paperwork generated by some interaction you're about to have or are having, or some incident that's generated some piece of paper that's been sent to you. And folks, it really doesn't matter what the paperwork pertains to. If you read down the rest of the body of the document, you'll realize that this is very much you may not communicate with me, you may not harm me, you may not interfere with my measurable physical energy in any way.
Well, that's the end game as to what you want. However, again, don't fall into the trap of commanding someone else to do something.
Exactly. This you can't order them either. This is the state of affairs. You can't actually order them to stop. You can request them to stop and say, if you want to continue interacting with me, here are my terms and conditions. It's that situation. It's not a situation where you're, giving them an absolute order, because as they don't have a right to give you an absolute order, you don't have a right to give them an absolute order. And we need to be really clear on that one, because we are finding a few inquiries about people who either have done this or want to do this, and it's not the right state to be in. It's not the right intent.
Mm.
Okay, the second class is what we've called incident or actual incident.
Yep. So basically, something has happened, um, and it's to cover a situation where you don't have necessarily a whole lot of detail. You don't have a piece of paper with you. Um, so the wording for that we've started out with regard to incident on, and then you insert your date at, insert the location of where this incident happened, involving, insert the name of the person, with address of, insert their address. So all it's doing is correlating an incident, where it happened, what date it happened, who it happened with, and what address they're from. So it's very similar to.
Hello, Scott. Have I lost you? Okay, we're back again. Had an interruption at that point. Scott, do you want to take up where we left off, where you were talking about how this particular one works?
Sure, it's basically the same as the original courtesy notice, only difference being instead of the starting point being a document to point at, we're pointing at an incident. So the only thing you're likely to lack is a reference number. We've got incident, we've got a date, we've got an individual, and we've got their address.
Would you need to describe the incident in detail?
No, very little detail required. I mean, basically, if you looked at a news broadcaster and they introduced something that happened, future reference, they'd basically say,
Back again, Scott, the news broadcaster approach.
right. So, say for example, a news broadcaster refers to an incident in the history or in past time. Uh, they basically refer to it as the incident that took place on a particular date and who it involved. So it's sufficient to be able to identify a context for the courtesy notice.
It's not a place to make a big personal statement.
No, you're not telling a story. You're not going into detail about what happened. All you want to do is you've got on the top of the document the name of the parties. You know where it happened. You know when it happened. If they can't join the dots to pull those factors together to get to a thing that happened, that's the basis for this courtesy notice, well, they really shouldn't be in business.
Yeah, so not forgetting we're sending this to the individual involved, not to peripheral people. So this is a gap-filling courtesy notice here.
Yep.
Okay, that's a pretty straightforward one. Next one is an interesting one. It's future action.
Okay, pull that one up. So the wording on that one is with regard to any future action by, and you insert their name with address of, and insert their name and hereafter respondent. So again, we're setting it up to the point where we've got a definition of who the respondent is. So I think. Chris, did we have, or were we talking about relating that to the slavery system, or am I confusing that with one of the other notices?
No, the other two notices cover the slavery system and the closure of the slavery system. This is more a case where if you're having a problem with a particular, or think you're going to have a problem with a particular group, for instance, your local police station, you could actually issue this to the person in charge of that station and just say, with regard to any future action by you with address of such, hereafter responded. It means that anything that the people involved with that person in that foreclosed entity, any action they might like to take against you will actually be covered by the terms and conditions of this particular one you've already sent out.
Yep.
And the motive there, from when we originally discussed this, was that you can carry the terms and conditions around with you. And should you happen to interact with any of those person's colleagues, you can give them a copy of the terms and conditions and say, here, this is for you. Your colleague should have informed you of the terms and conditions that I have for you guys interacting with me. And so here's your copy, and I'll be sending you an invoice, and I'll be sending him an invoice. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and the context we get for that is basically derived from the terms and conditions. So when you go down and you see the, say for example, unlawful claim of ownership or operating a slavery system, you might say, oh, this could be applied to anyone. The context comes from these terms and conditions where you are supplying it to someone who is aiming to perpetuate slavery systems or unlawful arrest or claim of ownership over your property without a lawfully binding contract.
Sure.
So,
And to remind people that when they read through the terms and conditions, they'll find in most instances there are multiple terms and conditions you'll be applying. Particularly now we've put in these general terms and conditions, which we'll read the new ones out in detail in a moment. So it always gets back to the terms and conditions that you're offering them. Don't forget, this is a two-way street. You're not ordering them. You can't order them to, absolutely never do anything interacting with you again. You can only say, if you want to interact with me, here are my terms and conditions.
yeah.
By interacting with you, they trigger the contract.
Yep.
We need to keep re-emphasizing that because we get communications from people that indicate they haven't got that point yet. You there, Scott?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
No, that's
Got to remind folks it's 6 o'clock in the morning for Scott. He just got out of bed.
Yeah, burning the candle at both ends around here, and
So, and in the middle.
yeah, that is a very good point. The aspect of trying to compel anyone to do something, that's basically what we're trying to bring to an end in this world. You look at it in one way. Again, another indicator is anywhere you've got a hierarchy system, it basically boils down to a slave and a master.
Yep.
And you'll see with One People's Public Trust, there is no hierarchy. There's no one saying you have to follow what I've said. It's suggested, it's laid out in front of you for, that sounds good to me. I'll go with that. If not, well, great.
No, thanks.
As long as it doesn't harm anyone else and prevent them from doing what they want to do.
Yeah, this is a misconception that's being put out by people who haven't read and listened and understood all the material that's available, and we know there'll be people like that. But one of their most grievous misunderstandings is that they think they're under something, when all that's happened is they've been returned to original jurisdiction, where there's nothing left but us and the Creator. There's no contractual organisation or contracts or trusts sitting us between us and our trust with the Creator. Full stop, end of story, nunc pro tunc, praetera praetera. Which actually means, now for then in perpetuity, in case you were wondering. So, forever, in other words.
Yep.
So now we're up to the really interesting bits, which are the two slavery foreclosure terms. And this generates out of literally an order that occurs in the final declaration and order that the trust did, where they actually ask all states of body to assist the trustees of the trust in foreclosing on the corporations. And in fact, it's an order. Okay, we're taking it as a request. It's vital that we actually become the enforcement in this by using our numbers and by doing it decently. That's what we're trying to do with these courtesy notices.
Well, Chris, to add to that, the actual text in that UCC filing, which is called a declaration and order, it's mentioned on page 2 of the courtesy notice.
Yes, it is. We've actually put it in there in this new version.
It first defines the public servants, and the public servants are volunteers. So
Yes.
there's the key. Is
Yep.
you're not being basically ordered to do that. However, once you've volunteered, the order is this.
Yeah, it says, I'll read it out specifically. It says, all beings of the Creator shall forthwith assist all public servants identified herein. So your assistance has been requested, and this is how we're implementing it. And I'll read the whole thing out in its entirety. You can see it on the second page of the courtesy notice. It says, all beings of the Creator shall forthwith assist all public servants identified herein, which in that particular document is the trustees, And in fact, it would also apply to the military, because the same document defines how the military can assist as well. To implement, protect, preserve, and complete this order by all means of the Creator and created as stated herein, by, with, and under your full personal liability. And there are a few terms after that which clarified even, define it even further, which we haven't included for the sake of brevity. But you can go back to the Declaration and Order and actually read that. So this implementation of the courtesy notices is following that request. So we have two of them. We have one that's considered just for in general, that you could send to virtually anyone who's involved in a foreclosed entity, because all of those entities, all those corporations, all the hierarchies, that's where the slavery is. And there's one specifically supporting an individual, which is an interesting one. So do you want to go over the first one, Scott? We've called it Slavery Foreclosure General.
Yep. Well, actually, probably the easiest way is to touch on the one for the individual, and that'll see the perfect context for the general one.
We'll start with that first. Yeah, go for it.
So the text there is, and again, all we've done basically in these courtesy notices, modified the very first paragraph that's leading up to the definition of respondent. So we're just setting the context. So we've said here, with regard to perpetuation of any and all slavery systems, specifically and insert the name of which part of the slavery system is being perpetuated, what do we got there? The date.
I know we've got name, surname. That's the individual that's being harmed. This is in support of a third party.
Sorry, my version of Pages on the Mac is not seeing your little...
my little fields. I'll read it out then. Okay.
It
says, with regard to perpetuation of any and all slavery systems, specifically and then you type in the type of harm here. It might be incarceration. It might be the financial harm, whatever it is that they've done, then the name and surname of the person that you're supporting, then there's the respondent's name, with address of, then respondent's address, hereafter respondent. Now we've specifically designed this to support people like Bill Brockbrader. I'm sure everyone's familiar with his particular problem. Any more comments on this?
Yeah, so we've nailed out a particular scenario that affects an individual, and like we've discussed before, that the perpetuation of the slavery system that results in the incarceration of that person or that individual is something that's causing harm to the one people. And so there you have the context to be able to put it to an individual who is maintaining or preventing that the individual you're discussing from being released. And so there's the context for that notice.
Now, in the terms and conditions, what Scott's talking about is what we've come to call harm to one is harm to all. That is, harm to one of the one people is harm to all of the one people. And that's a very important principle to keep in mind when you're dealing with people who are still interacting with the foreclosed corporations. They are actually harming us, and the actual part of the courtesy notice that we're leveraging, I'll point out, it's on page 1, and here's what it says. I'll just get back to it. Now this is in the duly verified notice section, where you're actually detailing the sorts of unlawful and illegal actions that will result in this courtesy notice contract being triggered. So it says actions against proponent by respondent, and I'm starting halfway through the sentence, causing and resulting in any and all damage to proponent, inclusive of physical harm, physical detention, property seizure, property damage, financial damage, or any other damage of proponent's measurable energy. Someone like Bill Brockbrader is in prison. If you are upset distressed, outraged by the fact that he's been treated this way and continues to be treated this way, then your measurable energy is damaged. And what will apply is term number 11. It's a new term, and if you look at the schedule in the new courtesy notices, you'll see the table's been simplified. We've merged the two. There were two tables before. We've merged them into one, and also changed the way we're pricing them. And this is the new term number 11. Do you want to read it out, Scott?
Sure. So we're saying action against another, not party to these terms and conditions, absent a lawfully binding contract between the parties, causing harm to proponent, including but not limited to damage of proponent's measurable energy. So,
yeah, and also in the same, if you actually invoiced someone for this, you could actually use term number 16 as well. Do you want to go through that one?
Sure. So term 16 is operating or perpetuating any and all private money systems, issuing, collection, legal enforcement systems, operating slavery systems of and against the one people. And the one people are defined in UCC filing statement previously filed by OPPT. So you could say that covers anyone turning up to work to continue perpetuating the slavery system.
It does. It does. And this is where we can actually use this courtesy notice very widely. Now just going back to my spot in my document here. So that's actually foreclosure individually. Okay, so we're specifically supporting an individual, so that if part of this is the treason tracker aspect of the website, the OPPT website that we're currently working on setting up, so that we can actually identify specific instances where someone has been mistreated, and where people are prepared to use this courtesy notice, this particular one, to support that individual, because this is our enforcement. This is us standing up and saying to the system, stop, you've gone too far. So what we're hoping is that you guys will jump on the judges as one particular thing, so they get 10, 15,000 emails. Anything else to add to that particular one, Scott?
Yeah, I was going to clarify. It's our standing up saying this is what are the consequences of your actions.
Yes.
So it's go out and do them if you choose, and this is what the consequences are.
Yes.
Make your choice accordingly.
Which they have a free will right to choose, just as we have a free will right to ask them not to do something.
Yeah.
And if they do it, and if they do respond to us, then you can respond with an invoice quoting the terms we've just discussed. And when we go to the slavery foreclosure general, do you want to read that one out, Scott?
Yep, hopefully I got my fields. May not be able to see these again. Actually, if you can read that front sentence.
Sure, yeah, it says, with regards to perpetuation of any and all slavery systems by respondent's name, with address of, respondent's address, hereafter respondent. Completely general.
Yeah, so you can see the general aspect there. The only difference to the last one was it wasn't pinning it down to a specific individual that was being affected. So it's essentially you're turning up to work to perpetuate the slavery system. Here's your notice. Here are the terms and the harms that may be suffered by me as a result of you doing it, and what I will accept in exchange for you doing those things.
So if that person contacted you in response to the courtesy notice, what would you do?
Well, here's the thing. What form of contact are we looking at? Is it a phone call or a letter that comes on a blank piece of paper with no letterhead and no pretense of coming from a foreclosed entity like a bank or a government? Or does it come on bank letterhead or government letterhead that talks to the document saying it's baseless?
Well, if it's on letterhead, what would you do?
Well, immediately that's the someone perpetuating the slavery system. Now, unless they're really backing out and going, look, I'm making steps to shut down on this. I couldn't find a bit of blank piece of paper to write to you on, and it was very clear. I'm saying that them writing on letterhead is likely a giveaway that they are still very much engaged, invested, and a part of that slavery system, and they're not writing you to offer you a box of chocolates.
Yeah, remembering at all times that the whole principle underlying this is that the corporations have been foreclosed and no longer exist. They have actually no business pretending to be one and writing to you with letters dressed up from that defunct organisation. That's this point that Scott's making. So if they write back to you in the standard fashion, as Scott said, they're probably not offering you a box of chocolates. But do read it carefully. They might be backing out. And that's fine. That's the response that we actually want to achieve. But given that you could send this to the CEO of any major corporation, any person operating that slavery system in particular could receive this courtesy notice. They're unlikely to respond to you directly because they know it's an admission of guilt. Should they happen to, though, you've got the terms and conditions to invoice them immediately. And that invoice to them is also a reminder that they always have the option of ceasing and desisting, which will cause the waiver on the invoice to kick in. And, you're relinquishing, your part of the contract because they're relinquishing theirs.
Exactly.
Don't forget that waiver.
No.
So as we go through this process, people will get the hang of the mindset required and of the principles that we're trying to operate on. We don't want to start ordering them around because that's what they do to us. We're trying to re-establish the priority of free will choice and ask them to behave decently. Now any other comments on the slavery foreclosure declarations?
Situation. Thank you. So think about the application for each one of these notices. There's 4 separate scenarios, and I'd imagine that amongst those 4 documents, you'll find one of them that is more applicable to a scenario that you've got. If you've got a piece of paper to start with, point to that. If you've only got an incident, say for example something happened on the side of the road and you've got no paperwork to support that, there's a document, there's a courtesy notice for that scenario. Should you wish to engage anyone who is perpetuating a slavery system and put them on notice, you can use the general courtesy notice. And then you could also go out of your way to see if there's harm that you're suffering as a result of someone that you know is being incarcerated or by someone who's perpetuating the slavery system. There's a specific courtesy notice for that.
Yep, and the terms and conditions to cover the invoicing.
Exactly.
And one of the traps we're seeing people fall into somewhat is they're trying to use the courtesy notice almost as a form of negotiation on specific instances, specific issues they're having with a foreclosed entity. But in effect, if you do that, you're not telling them you're foreclosed, that you're defunct.
Oh, and you're supporting that idea as well.
Yeah, so that's an approach that really can't be taken. This is a much more base stance. It's saying you're not there anymore.
Yeah.
You have to bear that in mind. There is no negotiating here. There's no playing in their playground anymore because their playground is gone.
It's about consistency. If you in one sentence mention that they're foreclosed and in the next sentence your actions speak to them not being foreclosed, you're not being consistent.
Yeah.
And if you're not being consistent, you're not dealing in the realms of absolute truth, and you're going to shoot yourself in the foot, and your credibility is just falling through the floor.
Yeah, this is very much each of us individually speaking our truth to the person that we're dealing with. And don't forget, we're always dealing with a person here when we send out one of these. We're not dealing with the entity. Look, there's just one final thing. There's an extra term that we added in the schedule, which is number 15, which is actually has been split out from a term further up the list. Do you want to speak about that briefly, Scott, before we finish?
This is the one we split out off the list. Yep.
Yeah, number 15. I'll read it out. It's just unlawful arrest or detainment per calendar day or part thereof.
Yeah. So we had that previously before belonging to, I think, point 7, where we're talking about unlawful physical harm, including but not limited to restricting proponent or inflicting bodily harm. So essentially what we did was that one related to say, for example, a one-off incident, whereas detainment typically is more on a daily basis. So your detainment might be for 5 days, 10 days, might just be overnight. So what we did was just split that one off to create for the situation where you could invoice for each day that detainment took place.
And also there's an interesting aspect to the term 16. It's also per calendar day. So if you send this to an organization and they happen to respond to you, say you send it to the CEO of Monsanto, for instance, there's a good suggestion, and they write back to you saying, we don't know what you're talking about, this is a load of rubbish, you can start invoicing them per calendar day until they cease and desist operating a slavery system.
Yes, and I think that would have the encouragement to encourage that person to go and have a look at this information.
Particularly if the person you sent it to was foolish enough to do a mail out to the 5,000 people who sent them courtesy notices, and starts getting invoices per calendar day for 5,000 from 5,000 people. That will be an interesting experience for their mailroom and for the secretaries who open the letters, etc., etc. There'll be a lot of energy put into that organization by us when we start to work on that scale, and we clearly see that as a major part of our enforcement of our wishes, of our free will choices to not live in a slavery system.
Yeah. I think we've all had enough of that.
Yep. Speaking of which, the audience have probably heard enough of us for the time being. So any final comments, Scott?
Yeah, I just reinforce the inspect your intent that you are exhibiting when you want to put one of these courtesy notices together. Just stop, have a look at what the intent is that's being manifest in what you're writing in the courtesy notice. If it's the commanding someone to do something, revisit it and have a look and think, do I really want to be commanding someone?
Yeah, the other thing you can do is a suggestion that came through from one of Scott's contacts who's if you like, communicating with his personal Akashic records. And the suggestion that came down to him was that you meditate on this before you actually fill out the documents to get yourself into the right state of mind. And I'd suggest, don't think about, oh my gosh, I don't want them to take my stuff. Don't think about, I want to tell them what to do. Think about what kind of world we could all be living in a year's time if everybody did this. Because that is, we're just one step away from that, folks.
Exactly. Nice work.
Food for thought. All right, we'll bid you all farewell, and don't forget to send inquiries about courtesy notice questions or any issues you've got to foropaq@gmail.com. That's FOROPAQ @gmail.com. FOROPAQ@gmail.com. That'll come straight to Ken, Scott, and I. A lot of people are sending them through to others who are forwarding them to us. and it sort of clogs up everyone's systems. We just want all the inquiries to go to one address so we can work our way through them, because there are a lot of inquiries that are very similar, and we'll do batches of run-throughs as frequently as we can so that people get answers, and we'll be answering specific ones where there's a degree of urgency or necessity to do so. Thanks, Scott,
No worries.
and hope you have a good day.
Yeah, back to work.
Back to the slavery system,
Yeah,
but only for a short time.
exactly.
Okay, cheers.
That's good.